we are a couple of weeks out from the new mega sets from the Pokemon trading card game, and people are thinking it's going to change the meta a lot. And I think it's going to be a great addition to the game, but I don't know how much the meta is actually going to change. This is the current meta in Japan. We see Dragapult still on top with 4,400 points and a meta share of 15.7%, closely followed by Goldengo with a share of 15.2%, but a drastic drop in points. We see it goes from 4,465 all the way down to 3,720. And this is, you might think, oh, that's because it's all of the Dragapult decks combined. Well, yes, it's straight Dragapult and Dragapult Noir, but this is also all of the Goldengo decks combined. So it's both decks having a lot of different versions, and both decks having a lot of very similar representation. However, the points are very drastic. We see Dragapult winning a lot more than Goldengo, and we also see it winning a lot more than all of the other decks. The other tier 1 decks right now are Gardevoir, Charizard, and Grimmsnarl, and then the rest are these other decks down here. We see Raging Ball down in tier 2, and then the only real Mega deck that we see right now is Mega Lucario down in tier 3. So Megas haven't really cracked the set right now, and haven't really broken into the meta, but that's because of one thing, I think, and we'll get onto that shortly. This is a spreadsheet kind of to show you what's happening. So if I've gotten it correct, this is the meta share and the percentage wise of what's happening in tournaments in Japan from recently, and then this is what's been winning. So we see Dragapult has appeared in 29 top cuts, so it's gotten points 29 times compared to Goldengo's 36 times. However, Dragapult is on top because it's actually got more points compared to Goldengo. We see over here, this is the point distribution, so first place, second place, first place, second place, top 4, and top 8. I'm actually not too sure what that is over there, but this is the point distributions for what's happening over there. Oh yeah, this is like the amount of people, I think. So yeah, that's basically what's been going on over here. So Dragapult's been winning a lot more than Goldengo, right? And then over here we see Gardevoir, and then we see not Zoroark, Charizard, and then we see Marnie's Grimmsnarl. So that's a top 5 right now. The top 5 is Dragapult, then Goldengo, then Gardevoir, then Charizard, and Grimmsnarl. And just Dragapult has been winning a lot more. That's because I feel like Dragapult is usually, don't get me wrong, piloted by better players in a sense, but there is a lot of Goldengo, and Goldengo is just a very consistent deck, so we'll be seeing Goldengo a lot. So Goldengo is not going away anytime soon. And why is Dragapult having so much success? Well, that's because I think if we take a look at some lists right now that I'm going to show you, it is because of one card in particular. And you might be thinking this list looks very normal, right? It looks pretty similar to most lists right now. You've got your 4 Iono, you've got your Dragapult line, you've got your Dusknoir line, you've got your Double Badoo. The Pokemon aren't changing. You've got your 3 support EXs that are appearing in most of the decks. The only controversial thing you might think would be the Candy, but I think one of Candy is actually really good. This is very similar to the list I'm playing right now. You just swap out the 2 Brocks for 2 Hildas, and you've got my list. However, we've got 4 Lilies instead of 4 Researchers, and I think that is the main thing right now. We are seeing Lily everywhere. So Research sometimes is very awkward in your opening hand. You know, sometimes you'll open up with double Night Stretcher and a Counter Catcher and your Ace spec, and you'll have a Research as your only draw support, and it just sucks, right? Lily kind of plays around that. And not only does it play around that, it also helps Dragapult's main strength, being able to set up in a position where before you take prize cards, you're able to set up the board in a way you want to actually orchestrate the prize race. And Lily helps that a lot, because Research discards your hand, so discard all and then draw 7, whereas Lily's is just shuffle and then draw 8. So you're preserving your resources, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. Sometimes you do want to just not see those cards again, or maybe you've stacked your deck with Dracloaks and Ionos previously, and you don't actually want to draw into those cards again right now, so you just want to rip a Research and draw into fresh cards. Lily, unfortunately, doesn't do that, but it does prevent you from having to discard very questionable things towards the beginning of the game. But it does, however, draw 8 cards. So you are seeing a lot more cards. That is unless you've taken prize cards, then you're drawing 6. So that is the downside of playing this card, is you'll obviously shuffle draw 8 is broken, and then shuffle draw 6 is much more balanced. It's normal. We've seen shuffle draw 6 cards be 4-ofs in decks many times in the past with Cynthia, and it's really, really strong, because Dragapult is one of those decks that wants to set up before taking prize cards. It's not a very aggressive deck, so, and the best thing is that it doesn't really matter on the bombs either, because you can pop the bombs happily before taking prize cards. You can pop a bomb into an EX, you can pop a bomb into a Curlier, and still use your lilies for the same amount of cards. You're still drawing 8 cards because you're not taking a prize card. So until you decide to initiate your own prize race, you're drawing 8 cards off of every lily, and that is obviously incredibly strong, because Dragapult loves to see 8 cards. So now the odds of us finding our Dracloaks and finding our bomb pieces and these kinds of things is a lot higher than beforehand. So now we can start to facilitate cards like Rare Candy, because the odds of seeing this card in the beginning of the game is a little bit higher now. So we'll take a look at a few other lists, and you'll see that a lot of these lists are cutting out the researchers for their lilies. This is, I think, this is a very similar list to what we just saw. However, this is playing Hilda instead. A lot of the lists haven't really decided what the correct idea is behind Hilda or Brock and that kind of stuff, but I am seeing both still be played in almost every list. This is a straight Dragapult deck. This one, I feel like straight Dragapult really benefits from Lily, because especially since it plays so many specific tech cards, like we see a Psyduck for the Dragapult Dusk Noir matchup, we see a 1/1 Toedscool for the Goldengo matchup, we see a Maractus to stall out the game, and we see 4 Lilies being present alongside 2 Brocks. So, and then also, I don't know what card that is there, I can't really see. Volcan? I don't actually know. Whoops. Anyway, so, and then we're seeing, obviously, the 4 Iona. 4 Iona isn't changing right now. 4 Iona is just a straight thing. We are still seeing straight Pult running 8 energy, and we are seeing the Dragapult Dusk Noir kind of drop down to 7 energy. They're usually cutting 1 of the Luminous, and that's kind of normal. We've seen, even in the current format, a lot of these decks running 7 energy and not 8. But obviously when you're running 7 energy, not 8, then you kind of want to go up in the Hildas. So if we take a look at this list over here, this one is running 7, but it's actually, okay, never mind. This one's not running Hildas. The other one was running Hildas. Okay, so I got that wrong there. This one's running Hilda with 7 energy. But yeah, we'll take a look at some of the other lists over here. This one is running also 7 energy and 1 Hilda. But it is also running 2 Brocks. This one is, however, also running Researchers. So that is another thing I wanted to get to. I don't think we really know the optimal counts of stuff right now. We see a lot of decks going for the most common split for me that I see is the 4-4 split with the Iono and the Lilies, and then 0 research. However, there are quite a few people experimenting with a split of all 3. Like this one is going for a 4-3-3. And I think a 4-3-3 actually doesn't seem too bad, because this is now 10 draw supporters, plus 2 or 3 rather of the Brocks and Hildas. If I were to pick up a list that I would want to be as consistent as possible, I would pick up a list very similar to this. However, I would cut the Shaman and probably add a 4th Lily and change the Brock to a Hilda. I think that is probably very, very consistent, and it looks really strong, right? Another thing to be considered could be a 3rd boss, a 2nd jamming tower, or a 4th night stretcher, but I think right now just setting up is the main thing. Remember, in Japan it is best of 1s, so they want their decks to be as consistent as possible. So that is why we're seeing Dragapult take on a very consistent version of the deck. Finally, I wanted to take a look at this list. This list is quite interesting to me for 2 reasons. Well, one would be, where is Latias, and 2 would be where is Ursaluna. Right, so we'll be thinking, okay, well, Latias has been cut because we've replaced that with double air balloon. We've also got ourselves a Tatsugiri, which is nice because that pairs very well with the air balloon. And we've also got ourselves a Pokegear, which I'm not entirely sure I agree with the Pokegear. I'd rather that probably be a 3rd Night Stretcher in a deck like this, but, to each their own. And then another thing would be, okay, where's Ursaluna? Well, this deck is leaning very heavily into the closing with Briar. And that's the thing that some decks have been doing. They've been cutting the Ursaluna, not all of them, and it's not that common, but I've seen quite a few lists cut the Ursaluna and try to pivot into a Briar, because now the odds of you actually having Briar at the end of the game are a lot higher. Because the problem with Briar beforehand was when you're playing 4 Iono and 4 Research, if you start one of your Researches and Briar is in your opening hand, well, now you can't use Briar for the rest of the game. If Ursaluna is in your opening hand, well, you can use Ursaluna down the line because of things like Night Stretcher or Super Rod. So that's why Briar wasn't being picked over Ursaluna in these decks, but now with Lilies being such a prominent draw support, I can definitely see Briar find its way back into these lists. Why we aren't playing Latias? Well, that's just a personal preference. Obviously, they don't really like the liabilities on the board, and they'd rather have something like a Tatsugiri with a air balloon, just try and set that up in the beginning of the game, and then you have that to pivot out of in the beginning of every turn. That also pairs quite well with the Briar. You'll be thinking, oh, but how are we finding the Briar towards the end of the game? Well, obviously we're going through cards, and then towards the end of the game, we'll be able to get to a point where our deck is quite thin, and then we can probably stack the deck with the Dracloaks, put cards at the bottom of the deck, make sure if we either draw into the Briar, and if we don't, we're bringing that towards the top of the deck, and then we're able to see 6 cards from the top of the deck with the Sheritats, and then from there we'll probably be able to get the Briar, and then bam, we got Briar. And then obviously this is running a bit of a thicker bomb line as well, because you really want to pair the bomb with the Briar. That's why it's so strong. So you have a 3-2-2 line with a 1 rare candy as well, to make sure you can try and reuse as many Dusknoirs as possible. So I think for a deck like this, I would definitely choose a 3rd Stretcher over a Pokegear, but it is to each their own. Another thing to take note of is that there's no Monkey Dory, and also the Luminous energies are a lot lower than beforehand, so we're playing 5 basic energy and 2 special energy alongside 0 Hilda, and the only evolution support we have is actually the Jacques instead of the Brock, because we value the evolutions a lot more higher than getting these basic Pokemon out right now. And that's fair. I can definitely see something like that, because, you know, the Brock was great to find your Latias and also your Ursaluna towards the end of the game, but we don't need Latias in the beginning of the game anymore, because our Poffin is able to find our pivot, which would be the Tatsugiri, and the air balloon, we just have to try find that throughout the game. We're also obviously playing 1 Jamming Tower, because Jamming Tower is still very, very strong against lots of decks in the format, mainly being Goldengo, but the problem is now you are also turning off your own air balloon, which is something to consider. But yes, so I think moving into the next format, I think Dragapult is going to be the best deck in the game. I don't think nothing's changing. I think if you love Dragapult, you'll be very happy to go into the next format. If you don't like Dragapult, well, you're probably not going to be too happy, because the deck is gonna be even more consistent. I think this like, you'll be thinking, okay, but a lot of these lists aren't changing anything from the Research to the Lilies. If you've played a game with the Lilies, you'll understand how big of a deal it is. If you haven't, then I advise you to try it, because it just fixes the deck's problems. I've had so many people, you know, including myself, saying, damn, I wish I had, and I wish this wasn't a Research. And now those have been answered with Lily, and not only is it not a Research, you also just get to draw so many cards, and towards the end of the game, you don't always want to discard your hand if there's so many things, and then you just get to draw 6 cards, which is super nice, right? In the beginning of the game, you're getting +1 card, and then towards the end of the game, you're getting -1 card. But in both of these scenarios, you're not having to discard your cards from your deck. And honestly, this is just not one of those decks that wants to discard cards. I feel like the only reason you'd want to discard a card would probably be like an early game Dracloak, because then you can get that back. That turns Night Stretcher into out the Dracloak a little bit later. So I feel like that could be a thing, but I guess we can also use Ultra Ball now to discard this if we have an opening hand to get a Dreepy or a that thing or a Badoo, and then have Night Stretcher next turn to get this guy back out of the discard. So yeah, anyway, that's what Dragapult is looking like right now in the Japanese format, and I think it is going to be incredibly strong moving into our, I don't know what the set's called, Mega Brave set, but yeah. Thanks for watching.